So, we started researching text analytics about 2 weeks ago now, which naturally means we're experts on the subject. In short, text analytics is the process of taking some sort of unstructured text and extracting meaning out of it using predictive analytics. For example, let's say you go to Olive Garden for a meal, but after finishing your ninth basket of breadsticks, they refuse to serve you another. Obviously, this warrants a bad review, and so that's the first thing you do when you get home. Now, Olive Garden could read your review manually. However, if they have lots and lots of reviews, it would be inefficient to read every single one. Instead, they might use text analytics to automatically pull and sort by just the important aspects of each review. Now, that's just one very simple example, but you can imagine how this concept could be applied to different areas. Before we go more in depth into the specifics of text analytics, it's worth mentioning some other terms that are closely related to it. First off, there's natural language processing, or NLP for short. NLP is the study of linguistics using computer science, which is the fancy way of saying it's a method used to make computers understand language. NLP is very useful since text analytics is all about getting meaning out of text, and that isn't possible if the computer can't understand the text in the first place. There's also something called text mining, which solves the same problems as text analytics, just using slightly different techniques. Of course, I only know this because text mining kept coming up when I was Googling text analytics. For our purposes though, they're basically the same thing, with the only real difference being that text analytics sounds a lot cooler. Now, you're probably wondering, well, Brendan, how old is text analytics?
No one was wondering that.
Alright then. As I was saying, text analytics were first used back in the 1990s to organize documents, so it's not exactly new. However, since then, there have been many improvements to the technology, such as combining natural language processing and machine learning, rather than just one or the other.
To do any kind of text analytics, we need text, obviously, and there's a lot of text out there, like a ton. So if you're the chief text analyzer for a big insurance company, you have to determine both what you're looking for and where you're going to find it. Sometimes the information could be found snooping on people's Instagram pages, and other times it could be right there in your company's claims. In general, text analytics could be used to grab data from many different sources like medical reports, online forums, social media, or company files. Alright, if you've zoned out up until now and still don't know what the heck text analytics are, this next part is all you really need to know to sound smart to your big-time insurance boss, or ace your actuarial internship interview. There's 3 ways an insurance company would use text analytics. More accurate underwriting, to make the claims processing job a lot easier, and to figure out if your customers like the job you're doing. Let's say Sally here applies for a life insurance policy. Before I can give Sally an awesome premium, I need to know everything about Sally. When she applies for the policy, she includes in her application all of her personal information, age, sex, medical history, and she also writes a bit about her lifestyle. Instead of reading hers plus hundreds of other written applications, I can just use really complicated computer software that I don't understand called text analytics to pull out the information I need from Sally's application. This not only saves me time, but the information that it pulls will be useful when I have to pool her with others of the same risk. Now let's say Sally decided to lie in her application. She wrote that she stays inside every day and called herself, and I quote, the least riskiest person on the planet. However, Sally didn't know that my company uses text analytics. Using the fancy computer software again, I can surf through everything she's written on Instagram, Twitter, and maybe a few Yelp reviews to see if her story checks out. Turns out she's a bungee jumping enthusiast, which is a little risky. So with my newfound knowledge, I won't be taking on any unexpected risk, and unfortunately, Sally will not be getting the premium she had hoped for.
When it comes to claims processing, there's a few different ways text analytics could be used. One of these is to facilitate or even automate the early stages of the claims process. Let's say Fred's house burned down, and so he phones his insurance broker to make a claim. The insurance company could have a system set up to record the call and convert the spoken words to text. From there, making use of text analytics, we could find what Fred is attempting to claim and whether or not it's part of his coverage. Admittedly, this would be very advanced and isn't necessarily a very realistic use of text analytics, but it's still something to think about. A more plausible way text analytics can help in the claims process is to flag potentially fraudulent claims. Staying with our first example, let's say a month before the fire, Fred has been laid off and was in a pinch for money. In reaction to this, Fred decided to update his friends and family about his situation on social media. Now, if the insurance company uses text analytics to scour Fred's social media during their investigation, it would see this as a big red flag and could be investigated more thoroughly. And while you may be thinking, oh, well, you've got to be pretty dumb to post on social media before committing fraud, to that, I remind you, you've got to be pretty dumb to commit fraud.
When it comes to insurance, you rarely get people tweeting, "In love with my life insurance policy, best premiums ever." Insurance just isn't that cool to most people, so for the most part, people just pay their premiums and forget about their insurance until they need to make a claim. So if you run a big insurance company with tens of thousands of customers, it might be hard to tell if they're happy or unhappy with your company and its customer service. Using text analytics and something called sentiment analysis, you can rapidly look through many different sources like review and messaging websites or social media to get a better idea of how people feel about your company. Using sentiment analysis, which is just a subset of text analytics, a person's sentiment can be drawn from their written text. So if there were 1,000 reviews or statements about the insurance company, you would have a better idea of how many of those are positive or negative reviews and get a better sense of the overall sentiment towards your company.
As I mentioned earlier, text analytics were first used in the 1990s, and so it's been around for nearly 30 years. With all the amazing uses of text analytics previously mentioned, it makes sense to assume many insurance companies have already implemented text analytics to their operations, but that's not quite the case. Turns out implementing it properly is almost as hard as reviving your great-great-grandparents and trying to teach them how to play Fortnite. There's a few reasons for these difficulties, easily the largest of which being that computers aren't great at determining the meaning of sentences. Thanks to the way language works, a program which simply looks for certain words and sorts based on that doesn't work. Here's a sentence which is positive and about food. Here's one that is negative and about food. And here's one that is positive but not about food. As you can see, they all contain the words food and great. However, they all have different meanings. So if looking for specific words often doesn't work, what do we do? The answer is to use machine learning, but the specifics would go a little bit beyond the scope of this video. That, and we're only doing it next week in my computer science class. On the topic of machine learning though, another reason implementing text analytics isn't a simple task is due to the large amount of processing power required to run the system. The computer has to find the text, read the text, and then process the text. Meanwhile, the text is useless more often than not, so it has to do this over and over again. Finally, even if you do everything right, and have an algorithm that can successfully pull and sort text from social media, it still won't save you from the people that take pictures of themselves looking active, when in reality, the only activity they're doing is swimming in the likes and comments they get on their posts.